Hey everyone, I'm Betty, 20, torn apart by a family that never understood me. When I was 8, my half-sister Evie's leukemia needed my bone marrow, but my dad stopped it, defying my mom's desperate pleas. She's hated him, and now me, for years, blaming me for Evie's pain, until I chose Dad's side, shattering her control. Where are you watching from? Drop it below, and if families ever stabbed you in the back, like and subscribe for this painful truth. This is my journey of standing up to a secret that broke us. Let's rewind to my childhood, when I first felt the sting of their battles, a hidden rift that left me craving love I couldn't find. Mom's cold silence and Dad's quiet protection shaped a fight I didn't choose, one that would ignite my resolve to reclaim my voice years later. Living between Mom's and Dad's houses in Boston at 8 felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of snakes. I'd pack my little backpack every week, dragging it between their worlds, trying to keep my balance. Mom, Diana, lived in a cramped apartment with her new husband, Paul, and my half-sister Evie, who was just a baby then, born with leukemia that cast a shadow over everything. Dad, Thomas, had a quieter place across town, where my older brother Kevin and younger brother Mark shared a room, and I had a corner with a creaky bed. The divorce had split us, but the real war started when Evie got sick. I didn't know the details at first, just the yelling that seeped through walls, a sound that made my stomach twist. Have you ever felt like a house was holding its breath, waiting for the next explosion? That was my life. It began with whispers I wasn't meant to hear. One night, staying at Mom's, I crept to the kitchen for a glass of water and caught her and Paul arguing. "She's the match!" Mom's voice was sharp, desperate. "We have to test her!" I peeked around the corner, seeing Evie in her crib, her tiny face pale and still, tubes snaking from her arm. Paul nodded, but his face was tight. "Thomas won't allow it," he said. "He's blocking us." I didn't understand match or test, but I knew it was about me. The next day, at Dad's, I heard him on the phone, his voice low but firm. "She's too young, Diana. I won't let you put her through that." Too young for what? I wondered, clutching my teddy bear, feeling like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Evie's illness became a ghost in our lives. At Mom's, she was everywhere. Doctor's visits, hushed phone calls, the beep of machines. I'd sit by her crib watching her breathe, her little chest rising and falling like it might stop any second. Mom would hover, her eyes red, and sometimes she'd look at me with something hard, like I'd failed her. I didn't get it then, but that look stuck with me. At Dad's, it was quieter, but the tension followed. Kevin, 10, would mutter about Mom's crazy plan, and we'd piece it together. Something about my bone marrow, something Dad was fighting. I was 8, too young to know the science, but old enough to feel the weight. Have you ever carried a secret you didn't ask for? It was like a stone in my chest. The fights escalated. One weekend, Mom stormed into Dad's house to pick me up, her face flushed. "You're endangering Evie!" she shouted, waving papers I later learned were test results. Dad stood firm, his jaw set. "She's my daughter, not a donor bank. Find another way." I hid behind the couch, my heart pounding, as Kevin pulled me close. "They want your bone marrow," he whispered. "But Dad says no." I nodded, scared but relieved, not knowing what it meant. Mom's voice cracked. "You're killing her!" And Dad's reply was cold. "I'm saving Betty." Saving me from what? The words swirled, and I felt torn between their anger, a kid caught in a storm I couldn't control. Mom's guilt turned into a wall between us. After that fight, she stopped tucking me in or reading stories. She'd sit by Evie's crib, murmuring to Paul, while I ate cereal alone in the kitchen. "Why doesn't she love me anymore?" I asked Kevin once, tears in my eyes. He shrugged. "She's mad at Dad, not you." But it didn't feel true. I'd try to hug her, and she'd pat my head absent-mindedly, her mind on Evie. It hurt, like I'd lost her to a sister I barely knew. At school, I'd draw pictures of our family, leaving Mom out, and the teacher sent a note home, worried about my withdrawal. Withdrawal? I was just surviving. Have you ever felt erased by someone who's supposed to love you? That was my daily ache. School became a refuge and a battlefield. I loved art class, where I could lose myself in colors. But custody swaps meant I missed games and parties. Friends like Sarah, who'd share snacks, stopped inviting me when I couldn't show up. "Your mom's always fighting," she'd say, and I'd nod, ashamed. One day, I missed a field trip because Dad and Mom argued over the date, and the class photo came back with an empty space where I should have been. Kids whispered, "Betty's never here," and I ate lunch alone, my sandwich soggy from tears. The isolation grew, a silent punishment for a war I didn't start. I'd stare out the bus window, Boston's brownstones blurring, wondering why my family couldn't just be normal. Kevin was my anchor. At 10, he was wiser than me, always reading or tinkering with gadgets. He'd explain things late at night, his voice low so Mark wouldn't hear. "They wanted your bone marrow to save Evie," he'd say. "But Dad said it's too risky." I'd nod, picturing needles, scared but grateful. We'd sit on his bunk, plotting ways to avoid Mom's questions, a secret bond forming. Mark, 6, was too young to get it, giggling about cartoons while we carried this weight. Kevin taught me to stay strong, but the secret gnawed at me. What if Evie died because of me? The thought haunted my dreams, her pale face accusing me silently. Dad's protection felt like a shield, but it came with a cost. He'd take me to the park, buying ice cream, saying, "You're safe with me." I believed him, but Mom's anger followed. She'd call, demanding I convince him, her voice sharp. "Tell him to let you help Evie." I'd hang up, crying, torn between them. At Dad's, I'd overhear him on the phone with lawyers, arguing, "She's a child, not a donor." It made me feel precious, but also guilty. Evie's health declined. Chemo left her bald and Mom's eyes grew harder. I'd sneak her toys, hoping to fix it, but the divide widened. Have you ever felt love and blame at the same time? It was a knot I couldn't untie. The custody battles drained me. Every other week, I'd switch homes, my backpack a lifeline between worlds. Mom's apartment smelled of antiseptic, Evie's medical supplies everywhere, while Dad's place had the comfort of old furniture. But the fights, over drop-off times, over me, were relentless. One day, a judge ordered mediation, and I sat in a cold room, adults arguing while I drew circles on a notepad. "She needs stability," Mom said. "She needs protection," Dad countered. I felt like a prize, not a person. Friends stopped calling, their lives moving on while mine was a tug of war. I'd cry myself to sleep, wondering if Evie hated me, if Mom did too. Evie's presence grew heavier. At 8, I didn't understand leukemia, just that she was sick, her crib a fortress in Mom's living room. I'd watch her, her tiny hands clutching a teddy, and feel a pang. Mom would say, "If only," trailing off, her gaze on me. It wasn't said, but I heard it. If only I'd been tested. I'd bring her crayons, hoping to earn a smile, but she was too weak. Paul, her stepdad, would nod at me, his silence as cold as Mom's. At Dad's, I'd ask, "Why can't I help?" And he'd hug me, saying, "You're too little, Betty. Too little to save her, too big to escape the blame." The secret bonded Kevin and me. We'd sit in his room, whispering about the fights, piecing together the donor talk. "Dad's right," he'd say. "They can't force you." I'd nod, but doubt crept in. What if he was wrong? What if Evie suffered because of me? I'd lie awake, the Boston night quiet, imagining her pain. Kevin would pat my shoulder. "We're in this together," but the guilt was mine alone. School projects suffered. My science fair entry was a mess, and the teacher sighed, "Betty, focus." Focus? I was holding a family's secrets. The isolation, the blame, the love, it all swirled, shaping a fire I didn't know I'd need later. By the end of that year, I was a shadow of the 8-year-old who loved hopscotch. Mom's coldness, Dad's protection, Evie's illness. They'd carved a space inside me, empty, yet heavy. I'd look at family photos, my smile fading next to Evie's absence, and wonder where I belonged. Kevin's support kept me afloat, but the secret was a chain. I didn't know then that this battle would define me, that I'd one day face Mom's rage and choose my path. For now, I was just a kid, lost in a war I couldn't name, waiting for the day I'd understand why it all began. Turning 12 felt like stepping into a storm I'd only heard from a distance. The fights I'd overheard at 8 between Mom and Dad about Evie's bone marrow had faded into a dull ache. But now, as a teen in Boston, they roared back with new intensity. I'd outgrown the confusion of childhood and the secret Kevin and I carried, that Dad, Thomas, had stopped me from being a donor, started to itch under my skin. Mom, Diana, was consumed by Evie's ongoing leukemia battles, her new husband Paul hovering like a shadow, while Dad's quiet strength pulled me toward him. I needed answers, and the Boston Public Library became my refuge. Have you ever chased a truth that scared you? That's where I began, unraveling a family lie that would set me on a collision course. I started with late-night searches, sneaking out after dinner at Mom's cramped apartment. The library's fluorescent lights buzzed as I pored over medical journals and legal texts, my fingers smudged with ink. I learned about bone marrow donations, how kids under 12 are rarely donors unless it's a sibling match, and even then, it's risky. Dad's refusal made sense now. He'd protected me from a procedure that could have harmed me, not just helped Evie. But Mom's version, pushing for it, blaming Dad, didn't add up. I found cases where parents fought over donor rights, and the courts often sided with the child's safety. Relief washed over me, but it was tinged with anger. Why had Mom made it my fault? I'd scribble notes, my handwriting shaky, hiding them under my mattress, a rebellion against her silence. Mom's resentment grew like a weed. At 13, I tried to talk about school, but she'd cut me off, her eyes on Evie, now 5, frail but fighting. "You don't understand her pain," Diana would say, her voice sharp, as if I'd caused it. Paul would nod, his approval a silent dagger. I'd sit at their kitchen table, picking at cold dinners, feeling like a guest in my own life. One night, she announced, "Evie needs you more than ever," her tone implying I owed something. I didn't argue, but inside, I seethed. Dad's house, with its worn couch and Kevin's gadgets, felt safer, where I could breathe. Have you ever felt pushed out by someone you love? That was my daily struggle. The visits with Dad became my lifeline, but Mom fought to control them. At 14, she started delaying pickups, claiming Evie's appointments, leaving me stranded at her place. I'd call Dad, whispering, "She won't let me go," my voice breaking. He'd drive over, his face tight, but Mom would block the door, shouting, "She stays here for Evie!" I'd sneak out windows or wait until she slept, my heart racing with guilt. Each escape left me shaky, wondering if I was betraying Evie. The stress gnawed at me, sleepless nights, a knot in my stomach, and my grades dipped. Teachers asked, "Everything okay, Betty?" But I'd nod, hiding the war inside. It was exhausting, like carrying a secret that weighed more every day. School turned into a battlefield of its own. In Boston's crowded hallways, Evie's friends, kids I barely knew, started targeting me. At 14, I'd hear, "Selfish sister," hissed as I passed, their eyes cold. One girl, Lisa, cornered me by the lockers, sneering, "Why didn't you save Evie?" I froze, my book slipping, unable to answer. The taunt spread, a rumor that I'd refused to help, fueled by Mom's whispers to other parents. Lunchtimes became solitary, my tray at an empty table, the chatter around me a wall. I'd sketch in my notebook, faces of my family with X's over Mom's, a silent rebellion. Have you ever been judged for something you couldn't control? It carved a loneliness I couldn't shake. Kevin, now 16, was my confidant. He'd sit with me after school, his room a mess of wires and books explaining, "Dad was right. They can't force kids." I'd nod, but the guilt lingered. Evie's pale face from old photos haunted me. We'd talk late, plotting how to avoid Mom's questions, a bond forged in secrecy. Mark, 10, was oblivious, laughing at cartoons, but Kevin and I carried the weight. One night, he found a medical article online, confirming donor risks, and showed me. "See? Dad saved you," he said. It was a lifeline, but Mom's blame still echoed, pulling me in two directions. The library research deepened my resolve. At 15, I'd spend hours there, digging into case law, learning about parental rights and medical ethics. I found a ruling where a court denied a minor's donation due to health risks, mirroring Dad's stance. It was validation, but it also fueled my anger. Why had Mom pushed so hard? I'd copy pages, my hands trembling, hiding them in my backpack. One day, a librarian, Mrs. Carter, noticed my focus. "Big project?" she asked. "Family stuff," I mumbled, and she smiled, unaware of the storm. That knowledge became my armor, a secret weapon against Mom's narrative. Mom's favoritism toward Evie grew blatant. At 15, I'd watch her fuss over Evie's treatments, buying her gifts, while I got hand-me-downs. "She needs it more," Diana would say, dismissing my straight A's or soccer goals. Paul would grin, reinforcing her, and I'd feel invisible. One birthday, she forgot mine, planning a party for Evie instead. I sat in my room, hearing laughter below, tears staining my pillow. Dad noticed, taking me for ice cream, saying, "You're enough, Betty." His words were a balm, but Mom's rejection stung deeper. Have you ever felt replaced in your own home? It was a wound that wouldn't heal. The decision to live with Dad came at 15. After months of sneaking out, I told Mom, "I'm moving to Dad's." Her face darkened. "You're choosing him over us?" she snapped. "Over Evie?" I nodded, my voice small but firm. "He protects me." The move was chaos. Packing my clothes, Mom's shouts, Paul's threats to call lawyers. Kevin and Mark followed, and we settled into Dad's house, a new normal. But Mom's calls persisted, begging, then blaming, widening the gulf. I'd lie awake, wondering if I'd betrayed Evie. But Dad's quiet, "You're safe," steadied me. The isolation at school worsened. At 15, the taunts evolved. Notes slipped into my locker reading, "Evie's suffering because of you." I'd crumple them, my hands shaking, but the words stuck. A teacher, Mr. Hayes, pulled me aside, concerned, but I couldn't explain. "Family issues," I said, and he nodded, unaware of the depth. I joined a book club to escape, but even there, whispers followed. The loneliness was a constant companion, fueling my determination to prove my worth, not just to Mom, but to myself. By mid-15, the divide was a chasm. Mom's cold calls, Evie's friends' jeers, my own guilt. They built a fire in me. I'd sit with Dad talking about college, his eyes proud, and feel a flicker of hope. But Mom's voice, "You owe her," lingered, a chain I'd soon break. The research, the sneaks, the taunts, they were shaping me, a girl ready to face the truth, no matter the cost. That choice to leave Mom's house wasn't just a move. It was the first step toward shattering her control, a rebellion I didn't yet fully understand. Walking into Mom's house in Boston at 20 felt like stepping into a trap I'd avoided for years. I'd moved in with Dad, Thomas, at 15, leaving behind her cold silences and Evie's fragile presence. But she'd called me over, her voice tight with something I couldn't place. The living room was dim, Evie's medical equipment still a ghost in the corner, though she was 12 now, stronger but marked by leukemia's toll. Mom, Diana, paced, her face a storm, while Paul hovered near the kitchen. I knew this wasn't a casual visit. Her eyes burned with an old grudge. The air crackled with tension, and I braced myself, unaware that this day would unleash a truth that would rip our family apart. Have you ever felt a moment where you knew everything was about to change? That was me, standing there, waiting for the explosion. It started with her rant. "Your father stopped you from saving Evie," she began, her voice low but venomous. She clutched a photo of Evie, bald from chemo years ago, her finger jabbing at it. "He denied her a transplant when she was 4, Betty. Her health could have been so much better if you donated back then. He's a monster, and you live with him." I stood still, her words hitting like stones. Paul nodded, his silence a silent accusation. I'd heard this before. the blame she'd whispered over the years, but today it was a flood. "How can you stand it?" she demanded. "How can you live with him after what he did?" Her rage filled the room, and I felt the weight of her expectations crushing me. But I wasn't the scared kid anymore. Then I dropped the bomb. "I always knew," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Mom froze, her mouth open, disbelief flashing across her face. "What?" she whispered, as if I'd slapped her. "I've known since I was 8, I continued. "Kevin and I figured it out. Dad told us he was protecting me." The silence that followed was deafening, her eyes narrowing as the truth sank in. I'd carried that secret for 12 years, a shield against her guilt trips, and now it was out. Her face contorted, rage replacing shock. "You knew?" she screamed. "And you did nothing? You let Evie suffer?" The accusation stung, but I held my ground, the research I'd done as a teen echoing in my mind. Dad's decision was right, legally and morally. Her fury erupted. For the next hour, she paced and yelled, her voice rising with each word. "You're heartless! Evie's pain is on you! How could you keep this from me?" She threw the photo down, glass shattering on the floor, and I flinched but didn't move. Paul tried to calm her. "Diana, stop!" But she shoved him away. "No, she's as bad as Thomas." I let her rage, standing like a rock in a storm, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. She'd disowned me before, but this felt final. "I can't look at you!" she spat finally. "You're not my daughter anymore!" The words cut deep, but they also freed me. Have you ever had someone reject you for standing your ground? It was a wound, but also a release. The fallout spread like wildfire. That night, Diana called relatives, spinning a tale that I'd known and done nothing, painting me as a cold traitor. Aunt Margaret, who'd always sent me birthday cards, stopped answering my calls. Uncle Robert, Dad's brother, texted, "Is it true, Betty? How could you?" Their words stung, a chorus of judgment from people I'd once trusted. I'd lost the extended family I'd clung to, their support yanked away by Mom's lies. One cousin, Emily, confronted me at a park, her voice shaking. "Evie's still sick because of you," she said, and walked off. The isolation was suffocating, a new layer of loneliness in Boston, but it fueled my defiance. I wasn't the villain. They'd made me one. Evie's confrontation hit hardest. A week later, she showed up at Dad's house, her face pale but determined. "Why didn't you help me?" she asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was 12, her voice small but heavy with hurt. "Mom said you could have saved me, but you didn't." I froze, her words a knife to my gut. I'd seen her struggle, her treatments, and now she blamed me too. "Evie, I was 8, I said softly. Dad stopped it because it was dangerous for me." She shook her head, sobbing, "But I'm still sick," and ran off. The encounter left me shaken, doubting myself. Had I been wrong to stay silent? Her pain was real, and her tears blurred my resolve. Have you ever faced someone you love blaming you for something out of your hands? It tested every part of me. My brothers, Kevin and Mark, became my lifeline. Kevin, now 20, came over that night, his face grim. "She's lost it," he said. "But we knew too. Dad was right." Mark, 14, nodded, adding, "I figured it out in my teens. It makes sense now." Their support steadied me, a trio against Mom's storm. We sat in Dad's living room, the TV off, talking through the chaos. Kevin pulled up old medical articles, reinforcing that minors aren't forced donors. "You didn't fail her," he said. "Mom did, pushing you." Mark hugged me, his small frame a comfort. Their backing gave me strength, but the family's rejection loomed large. I wasn't alone, but the battle was far from over. Mom's disownment echoed through Boston. She told Paul to bar me from their home, and word spread to family friends. One day, Mrs. Carter, our neighbor, crossed the street to avoid me, her usual smile gone. "Diana says you're heartless," she muttered when I waved. The sting was sharp, a community turning its back. I'd walk to the corner store, heads turning, whispers following. It was like living under a cloud, every glance a judgment. Dad tried to shield me, taking me to diners, but even there, I'd catch waitresses whispering. The isolation was a new kind of prison, one Mom had built with her lies. Have you ever felt the world shrink because of someone else's words? It was my reality. The tension with Evie lingered. After her visit, she sent texts, short and pained. "Why, Betty?" I'd reply, explaining Dad's choice. But she'd go silent. Her illness had shaped her view, and Mom had fed it. One afternoon, I saw her at a park with Paul, her limp more pronounced. She avoided my eyes, and I felt a pang, guilt, love, frustration, all mixed. I wanted to fix it, but how? The blame she carried wasn't mine, yet it weighed on me. I'd lie awake, her tears replaying, wondering if I'd chosen wrong. But Dad's voice, "You were safe," anchored me, a truth I clung to. Paul's role grew darker. He'd call Dad, threatening, "You've turned her against us," and once left a voicemail, "We'll fight for her influence." The legal threat loomed, a financial burden Dad couldn't afford. I'd hear him on the phone, his voice strained, and feel guilty for the cost. We tightened our budget, fewer outings, cheaper groceries, but he never blamed me. It was a new stress, a shadow over our peace, and I wondered if Mom's wrath would never end. Have you ever felt responsible for someone else's fight? It was a burden I carried silently. The family rift reshaped my world. Kevin and Mark stood firm, but cousins like Emily stopped texting. One holiday, I saw Aunt Margaret at a store, her cart turning away from mine. "Diana's right," she muttered. The loss of that network hurt, a safety net gone. I'd walk Boston streets, the city's charm muted by their rejection. Dad's house became my fortress, but the outside world felt hostile. I started journaling, pouring out my anger, a habit that steadied me. The isolation pushed me to prove myself, not to them, but to the girl Mom had tried to erase. By the end of that month, the truth had unleashed a war. Mom's disownment, Evie's blame, Paul's threats. They were a triad of pain, but also a catalyst. I'd sit with Dad, his hand on mine, saying, "You did right, Betty." His belief in me was a flame, and I felt it growing. The research from my teens, the support from my brothers, the sting of rejection, it all built a resolve I didn't know I had. Mom thought she could control me with guilt, but I was done being her pawn. This was the moment I'd start to shatter her hold, a fight I'd carry forward, no matter the cost. The silence after Mom's disownment in Boston was louder than her screams. At 20, I'd walked out of her house, her words, "You're not my daughter anymore," ringing in my ears, and settled into Dad's place with a mix of relief and dread. The confrontation had unleashed a truth I'd hidden for 12 years, and now the family I'd known was gone, replaced by a void filled with Dad's quiet support and my brother's solidarity. But the peace was fragile. Paul's threats and a new battle at school loomed, testing my resolve to stand by Dad's choice to protect me from being a bone marrow donor for Evie. This was the breaking point, where I'd have to decide who I was beyond their blame. Have you ever felt the ground shift under you after a fight you couldn't avoid? That was me, stepping into a new war I hadn't seen coming. Dad's house became my sanctuary, but it came with a price. After Mom's rage, I moved my few belongings, clothes, books, that old teddy, into the spare room, its walls bare but safe. Dad, Thomas, would sit with me at night, his hands rough from years of carpentry, saying, "You did the right thing, Betty. I saved you." I'd nod, the weight of his decision sinking in. He'd explained it years ago, how the procedure could have risked my health, how courts backed him, but hearing it now, post-confrontation felt different. It was validation, a shield against Mom's narrative. Kevin, 20, and Mark, 14, backed me up, their presence a buffer. "She's wrong," Kevin said, scrolling through his phone. "You were a kid." But the outside world wasn't so kind, and the threats were just beginning. Paul's legal move came fast. A week after the fallout, he called Dad, his voice cold. "You've turned Betty against us. We'll sue for custody influence." The words hit like a slap. Dad paled, setting down his coffee. "They can't do that," he muttered. But I saw the worry. Paul followed with a letter claiming I was emotionally manipulated and demanding I return to Mom's for family therapy. The cost of fighting back loomed, legal fees we couldn't afford on Dad's modest income. I'd hear him on late-night calls with a lawyer, his voice strained, and feel a pang of guilt. We cut corners, fewer takeout nights, Mark's soccer gear postponed. But Dad never blamed me. It was a financial shadow, a new stress that made me question if my choice was worth it. Have you ever felt like your fight hurt the ones you love? That guilt gnawed at me. School became another battleground. I'd enrolled at a community college in Boston, dreaming of a psychology degree to understand this mess. But a counselor's interference threw me off. Ms. Larson, a stern woman with a clipboard, called me in one afternoon. "Betty, we've had concerns raised about your emotional state," she said, her tone clipped. "Your mother reported instability after a family dispute." My stomach dropped. Diana had twisted the disownment, painting me as unhinged. "I'm fine," I said, but she pushed. "We may need an evaluation. It could affect your enrollment." The threat to my college plans, my escape, was real. I'd worked hard for those classes, balancing part-time jobs, and now this? I left her office, my hands trembling, the weight of Mom's lies crashing down. Have you ever had someone sabotage your future with words? It was a blow I hadn't expected. The evaluation loomed like a storm cloud. Ms. Larson scheduled a meeting with a psychologist, her email citing potential distress from family issues. I panicked, imagining my transcript marked, my dreams derailed. I met Dad at a diner, his face lined with worry. "We'll fight it," he said, but the cost, time, money, energy, was a burden. I spent nights drafting appeals, gathering letters from teachers who knew me, my hands cramping over the keyboard. One professor, Dr. Hayes, wrote, "Betty's resilient." But it felt like a lifeline dangling just out of reach. The process drained me, sleepless nights blending with college stress, and I wondered if Mom's reach was endless. Her lie had turned a new chapter into a fight for survival. Paul's threats escalated. He sent another letter, this time with a lawyer's header, demanding I attend mediation or face legal consequences. The word consequences echoed, a vague threat that kept me awake. Dad consulted a friend, a retired attorney, who warned, they could claim emotional coercion, but it's weak without proof. We couldn't prove much, my word against theirs, and the legal bills piled up. I took extra shifts at a local cafe, my feet aching, tips barely covering gas. Dad sold an old tool set, his eyes sad, and I hated myself for it. The financial strain was a new chain, linking me to a battle I hadn't started. Have you ever felt like every step forward costs you more? That was my reality. The counselor's interference grew personal. Ms. Larson called again, insisting on a session with the psychologist, Dr. Evans, a man with a notepad and a skeptical stare. "Your mother says you've rejected family support," he said. I explained. She disowned me for telling the truth, but he scribbled, unconvinced. "We need to assess your stability," he pressed, and I felt trapped. I brought Kevin, who vouched for me, but Dr. Evans noted, "Sibling bias possible." The report loomed, a shadow over my college future. I'd sit in class, my mind racing, wondering if one lie could undo years of effort. The unfairness burned. Mom's manipulation reaching into my education, a place I'd hoped was mine. Dad's support was my anchor. He'd cook simple meals, his quiet presence a contrast to Mom's chaos. "You're brave, Betty," he'd say, his voice steady. I'd tell him, "You saved me," recalling the bone marrow fight, and he'd nod, eyes glistening. It was a bond forged in this storm, a choice I'd made at 15 to live with him, now cemented. Kevin and Mark joined us, their laughter filling the house, but the outside world felt hostile. I'd walk to college, Boston streets busy, but my world was small. Dad, my brothers, and a fight to keep my future intact. The legal threat from Paul took a toll. One evening, a process server knocked, handing Dad papers for a family intervention hearing. My heart sank. Another court date, another cost. The hearing was set for a month out, and Dad borrowed from a friend to hire a lawyer, a young woman named Claire. She was sharp, promising. "We'll show your stability." But the prep was grueling. Interviews, character references. I'd practice answers, my voice shaky, fearing Mom's lies would win. The financial pressure grew. Rent rose, and we skipped heat some nights, huddling under blankets. It was a sacrifice I felt deeply, a debt I owed Dad for standing by me. The counselor's report came back pending, a sword over my head. Dr. Evans scheduled a follow-up, his questions probing. "Do you feel guilt about Evie?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted, "but not for what Mom thinks." He scribbled, and I wondered if he'd twist it. I brought letters from professors, friends like Sarah from book club, but the process dragged. College deadlines loomed, scholarship applications due, and I'd stay up, my eyes burning, balancing essays and legal prep. The stress was a vice, squeezing my hope, but Dad's faith kept me going. "You're stronger than this," he'd say, and I clung to it. Paul's calls grew bolder. He'd leave voicemails. "This isn't over, Betty. We'll get you back." His tone menacing. I'd delete them, but the threat lingered, a shadow over our home. One night, he showed up, banging on the door, shouting, "You owe Evie." Dad held me back, calling the police, who escorted Paul away with a warning. The incident left me shaken, my trust in safety eroding. We installed a new lock, a small victory, but the cost, $200 we didn't have, added to the strain. I'd lie awake, the house creaking, wondering if Mom's wrath would never end. The hearing approached, a crucible I couldn't escape. Claire coached me, her voice calm. "Stay honest," she said. I practiced, my story clear. Dad's protection, Mom's blame, my choice. The day came, a cold courtroom in Boston, Mom and Paul on one side, us on the other. Paul argued, "She's been coerced," but Claire countered with my school records, Dad's testimony. The judge listened, her face unreadable, and postponed a decision, needing more time. It was a reprieve, but the wait was torture. I'd sit with Kevin, his hand on my shoulder, saying, "We've got this." But the uncertainty gnawed. The counselor's final report arrived mid-month, a mixed bag. Dr. Evans noted resilience, but flagged family conflict impact, recommending counseling, not expulsion. Relief flooded me, but the stain lingered. My file marked, my college path narrowed. I celebrated with Dad and my brothers. Cheap pizza our feast. But the victory felt hollow. Mom's lie had cost me, a scar I'd carry. Yet it strengthened my resolve. I'd chosen Dad, and that choice was saving me, even as it broke me apart. By the end of that month, I was a fortress of my own making. The legal threats, the counselor's judgment, the family's rejection, they'd built a wall around me, but also a strength I hadn't known. Dad's belief, Kevin's support, Mark's innocence, they were my foundation. Mom thought she could control me with guilt, but I was learning to stand tall. The breaking point wasn't just pain, it was the forge where I'd temper my resolve, ready to shatter her hold for good. The spring of my 21st year in Boston brought a shift I hadn't expected, a quiet after the storm that had raged since I was 8. Dad's house, with its familiar creaks and warm lights, had become my haven since choosing to live with him at 15, a decision that had shattered Mom's control after her disownment. The legal threats from Paul and the counselor's scrutiny had faded into a dull echo, and I was finally breathing, enrolled at Boston University, pursuing a psychology degree. The $2,500 I'd saved from cafe shifts funded my books, and Dad's pride in my A in Intro to Counseling was a balm. But the past wasn't done with me. Online trolls, fueled by Mom's old lies, resurfaced, testing my newfound peace. This was my chance to build a legacy, not just survive, and I was determined to rise above it all. Have you ever felt a victory shadowed by lingering ghosts? That was my new reality. College opened a world I'd only dreamed of. At Boston University, I threw myself into lectures, the campus's red brick buildings a stark contrast to the chaos of home. I joined a peer support group, sharing stories with others who'd faced family rifts, and it felt like finding a tribe. My goal was clear: earn a degree, maybe a master's, to help kids like me navigate emotional battles. I'd study late in the library, my notebook filled with case studies, the hum of students around me, a comfort. Dad would call asking about classes, his voice warm, and I'd tell him about a professor who praised my essay on resilience. It was a life I was building, brick by brick, a testament to the strength Mom had tried to crush. The $100 in tips I'd save each week went to a savings account, a nest egg for my future. But the digital past crept back. In late 2023, I made a new Instagram to connect with classmates, posting a photo of my first college project. Within hours, notifications exploded. Trolls had found me. Someone had dug up Mom's old Boston Herald interview from the lawsuit where she'd called me heartless for not donating to Evie. Comments flooded in. "Selfish girl ruined her sister. Hope she regrets it." My chest tightened, the hate a bitter echo of high school whispers. I'd thought the confrontation at 20 had buried this, but Mom's lies had a long reach. Have you ever had your past drag you back when you're trying to move forward? It was a slap I hadn't braced for. The harassment escalated. DMs poured in, one reading, "You're a monster for Evie." Another linking to a fake profile with my old school photo, captioned, "Betty, the family wrecker." I froze, my hands shaking, the room spinning. Was this Mom's doing, or just internet cruelty? I didn't know, but it scared me enough to lock my accounts, deleting posts, and retreating from social media. Campus felt exposed. I'd walk to class, scanning faces, wondering if a troll lurked nearby. Nights were restless, my mind replaying the venom, questioning if I'd ever escape. I confided in a group friend, Jake, who said, "Block them out." But the isolation stung. It was a new battle, one I hadn't anticipated after winning against Mom's control. I pushed back, refusing to let it define me. At BU, I focused on a research project on family dynamics, pouring my story into it anonymously. My professor, Dr. Miller, called it compelling, and it earned me a spot in a psychology conference. The validation was a shield, but the trolls persisted. One night, a comment on a deleted post resurfaced on X. "Betty let her sister die." I reported it, but the platform's response was slow. Dad noticed my mood, cooking my favorite chili, saying, "You're stronger than their words." His belief steadied me, a reminder of why I'd chosen him. I locked my profiles tighter, focusing on college, but the harassment tested my resolve daily. Reflecting on the bone marrow fight, I had no regrets. Dad's decision at 8 to stop the donation had saved me from a risky procedure, a truth I'd confirmed through research as a teen. Mom, Diana, had blamed me, disowning me at 20 when I revealed I knew, but her anger was misplaced. Evie's health issues, her limp, her fatigue, weren't my burden. Paul's threats and Mom's lies had tried to make them mine, but I saw through it. If Dad hadn't intervened, I could have been harmed, and Evie's outcome might not have changed. Her leukemia was aggressive, as doctors later admitted. I felt for her, but I wasn't her savior. My choice to live with Dad was about my safety, not her pain, and I stood by it. The family rift was a closed chapter. Mom and Paul hadn't spoken since the hearing's postponement, and Evie's silence after her confrontation left a gap. Kevin, 20, and Mark, 14, thrived with Dad, their laughter a soundtrack to our new normal. One day, I saw Aunt Margaret at a cafe, her eyes avoiding mine, a silent confirmation of Mom's sway. Dad's sister, Aunt Helen, called once, hesitant. "Diana's still angry," she said, "but I see your side." It was a small bridge, but I didn't cross it. Dad's love, Kevin's wit, Mark's hugs, they were my family now. Mom's rejection had hurt, but it freed me from her guilt trips. Have you ever found peace in letting go? It was a hard-won gift. The cost of my stand was steep. I'd lost Mom's side, Paul's threats, Evie's blame, the extended family's judgment, leaving a void. College was my lifeline, but the harassment added a layer of strain. I'd walk Boston's streets, the Charles River glinting, feeling the weight of their absence, but also my growth. Therapy at BU helped, a counselor named Ms. Carter guiding me through the guilt. "You're not responsible," she'd say, and I'd nod, the words sinking in. Dad's quiet pride, his "you're enough," built me up where Mom had torn me down. It was a legacy of strength, not just survival. If I could share one piece of advice, it's this: don't let family guilt dictate your choices. Mom tried to make me feel selfish for choosing Dad, using Evie's pain as a weapon, but I learned my worth isn't tied to her approval. Stand for your truth, even when they scream you're wrong. Fight for yourself, even if it means standing alone, because their narrative doesn't define you. I fought that battle, and it saved me. Have you ever had to break free from family pressure? It's the hardest win. The lesson I carry is clear. Strength is choosing your path, even against family pressure. I lost Mom's love, Paul's threats, Evie's trust, but I gained a self I could respect. The bone marrow fight, the disownment, the trolls, they forged me into someone who defies control. Justice wasn't just beating Mom in her game. It was building a life where her blame couldn't touch me. I'd do it again, not for revenge, but for the woman I've become, the one Dad always saw. This is my legacy, and I'm proud of it. Now I'm turning to you, my YouTube family. I've shared my journey from pain to power, and I want your stories. Have you ever defied family to claim your truth? Drop it in the comments. I read every one, and they inspire me. If this resonated, hit subscribe and ring the bell for more tales of resilience. Let's build a community of strength, one story at a time. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for reminding me I'm not alone. I'll see you in the next video.